Hi, welcome back to the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel for another interview. I'm Connor, and joining me is actress Tamela D'Amico. We chatted about Tamela's new film, One Little Finger, which is available on Amazon, her work on the Disney Channel series Best Friends Whenever, her singing, directing, and producing. If you enjoyed this interview or any of the others on the channel, please be sure to like and subscribe. So, welcome and thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me.
Great. And I suppose from a career standpoint, how have you been finding life in this pandemic?
The pandemic has been a challenge because obviously the entertainment business is pretty much shut down. Now it's opened a little bit, but the whole year was a shutdown, and projects that I have on deck have been stalled till next year, 2021, supposedly, And pardon me, during this time, I have my own production company, so there's a lot of stuff that I have in pre-production that kept me pretty busy. But just on a creative note, my fiance and I made a little movie in the house, a little short that was it was based off of a nightmare I had about the whole pandemic. And just keeping busy was the challenge as far as being creatively fulfilled. I'm always busy, but being creatively fulfilled, we came up with things to do in addition to everything else that I'm prepping for. But yeah, it's been a challenge because, not knowing what the virus was in the beginning and people's fears, just escalating things and then having everything shut down and then going into quarantine. It's been tough. And I think now that we're sort of, I'm not even going to say halfway open, but minimally open to do some productions, it comes with a lot of deeper care and a lot of COVID testing, sometimes, 12 times a week. And it's a lot.
Yeah, and I suppose you mentioned creativity, but when did you realize you wanted to pursue a creative profession?
It sort of was always in my blood. I'm a bit of an old soul, so I like old Hollywood movies. I was sort of raised on them, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and my mom kept me home. I didn't go to preschool. I did end up going into kindergarten, but I didn't go to preschool, which is the normal track for kids. And being the youngest of 5 kids with older siblings, I watched not the norm for kids. A lot of kids watch Sesame Street and a lot of PBS, which is public broadcasting. And I didn't watch that. I watched something that was called New York's Nostalgia Network, which would be akin to Turner Classic Movies now, where they play a lot of old shows and old Hollywood movies, and sort of schooled myself unknowingly on old Hollywood. And I just thought that in order to be an actor or performer, you had to do everything. You had to be good at everything. So I have all these different tracks in my career as a multifaceted talent or whatever, but it wasn't because I was trying to conquer the world. It was because I thought that's what a performer does. They have to be all knowing and all trained. And it came from there. And then my parents were really good at supporting my endeavors. So.
Yeah, and I was doing some reading up. So you're also a singer, and I guess how often are you able to tie acting and singing and other kind of creative endeavors together?
Not enough, but it's the goal for the next coming years. It's not because the opportunities haven't really been, well, now there are more there, but I just haven't created those opportunities enough for myself. That's where my frustration comes from, because I'm like, I could be doing this myself. And I finally have a project now that will help me collaborate, my singing, my acting, my directing all in one film. And now we just have to work on the financing part of it. But yeah, I have something finally in my own, slate for myself in that regard, where I can get to use all of my talents. But it hasn't happened to my satisfaction yet. I've done some branding deals and commercials and things like that, where all those things are rolling into one, but not in a feature film way yet.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of films, one of your new projects is One Little Finger on Amazon. So I
Yeah.
suppose, what can you tell us about that?
So One Little Finger, I play a character named Raina, who's an American neurologist who uproots her life to research music therapy in India. And
Yeah.
while there, I find myself teaching children and adults, and uh, have this great realization that there is ability and disability, like my research uh, was delving into. And basically, I use music to inspire them to challenge themselves, and let them see that they can, these dreams and goals that everyone else has, it's applicable to them. They can do it. My character has set up a musical performance at the end of the film, which is the whole thing we're trying to get to as we move through the
Sure.
stories of each of these kids. And they succeeded it, and the character basically goes through a bit of an eat, pray, love, just as I did, traveling as an actor to India. It was not a small thing, and I was there over 2 years back and forth doing this film.
Mm.
And I took it on because, the entertainment business loves to talk about inclusion and diversity, but not a lot of people put their money where their mouth is. And this film has over 80 people with disabilities in it.
Yeah, and I suppose what attracted you to the role of Raina in the first place? Had you ever worked with the director Rupam Sarma prior at all?
No, it's sort of an interesting story. I'll try to give you the bullet points, but basically, people say India is magic, and it is in a lot of ways. It's a very unique land with unique people and cultures with a lot of faith. Like if you have faith in
Mm.
India, they believe you have everything. And this film came to me in such an odd way. I had been offered two other Indian films prior that I did not take because my representation was fearful for me. They're like, we don't know the infrastructure there. We've never had someone shoot in India where these films would be, so we don't want you to go. So they sort of built up a fear in me about shooting in another country like that. And I didn't take those films, and one of those films ended up going to Cannes. And I was
Mm.
totally bummed because I was like, see, they were totally safe. It was fine. But what ended up happening with this was the director, Rupam Sarma, had known of me from the Grammy Foundation, from the music side.
Right.
I didn't know him, but he knew of me. And he ended up contacting me on Facebook out of frustration because he was like, Tamela, I've offered you this movie to your representative and they turned it down. And I just have a strong feeling that you didn't know about it. And I was like, I don't know about it. Like, A, that's completely not cool that that was done that way. But B, thank you for your perseverance because I would not have known. And if I was not so invested in my own social media, I probably would not have gotten that message. I don't know
Sure.
why. I really don't know why he chose me. It's something you'd have to ask him. A lot of people are asking me that question, but he moves a lot from faith and just his gut instinct. And he thought I'd be right for this part. So when I read the script, I was like, it's such a beautiful film. How can I not do this movie? And I talked to my reps and my lawyer, and they were like, let's vet people who know him and the company. So he gave me 20 people as to verify his credentials and whatnot, and we did, and all tracked out. And I think we must have put the fear of God into them because when I got to India, I had so much security.
Mm.
I was a little bit in actor jail. Besides having a very demanding filming schedule, there wasn't much time for me to be a tourist. And if I did want to go outside, it was like a lot of hoopla to get out of my room because everyone was being so protective of me, which I completely appreciated, not having been there before. Because some of the parts we were shooting were very rural, out there kind of areas. And
Yeah.
even before I went to India, the government, just trying to get my work visa to go there, they were like, "Why do you want to shoot in this place? Like, what is this about?" Because it bordered Pakistan, so it was
Mm.
very. They were like they couldn't understand why we were shooting there and But my passport was not cleared until the night before, like just moments before I was to go on a plane.
Yeah, and I just suppose on a completely opposite end of the scale, acting wise, you were on Disney Channel with Best Friends Whenever, and I suppose how was your experience of being on a Disney project?
Working with Disney was fantastic. It's
Mm.
wonderful to be part of the Disney family and also to play a Disney villain. Uh,
Right.
I played the younger version of Nora Dunn, who is known from Saturday Night Live, and I was a huge fan of hers. And I went into audition knowing who she was and sort of knowing how to emulate her because I was playing the younger part to her. It's a time travel show about two best.
Yeah.
So very cute. It's something I wish I would have had in my youth, my elementary youth. I would have loved to seen that show as a kid because it's so girl forward. You know, it's very positive for girls
Mm.
and all kids really. But yeah, playing a Disney villain had afforded me a a loyal fan base of kids. I mean, they really amped up my social media, which then enabled me by default to become a social influencer because I had the audience from, you know, being an actor and a director and whatnot and my music. But then once Disney got on board, it was like it just opened up a whole other world out there that I didn't even know was there. So it was a fantastic experience. I really like working with them.
Yeah, and in more of like a general acting sense, like when you're first cast as a new character, what aspects of them do you think about first? Like, their personality or their backstory or like physicality kind of thing?
Yeah, you know, the general points, like you mentioned, all that you just mentioned, definitely their backstory, where they're coming from, where they've been before this moment, their physicality, their wants, their desires. But ultimately, the key in acting is finding something within the character that is similar to you. Because
Right.
sometimes you play characters like that villain. I'm not a villain, you know. I would never walk around with a crowbar chasing kids, but
Mm.
you know, what is it about that character that is similar to me? And I think when it comes to best friends, whenever, just because we use that example, she was so driven to get what she wanted. And I'm like, I'm a very driven person. So it's like when she wanted to figure something out with regard to her time travel and all of her data, I work similarly. I love research. I'm sort of a forever student. So I love learning about things. When it comes to one little finger, you know, Raina is a neurologist. I'm not a doctor. My brother's a doctor. But for me, researching neurology, the question I had was, you know, what would make a doctor, somebody who researches the brain, what would make a doctor want to step out of general medicine and look for alternative therapies? And there
Mm.
has to be a reason for that. So I talked to a lot of neurologists, and you know, some were exceptionally by the book, which was interesting, and others were like, yes, music therapy is a very real thing. If you ever see on YouTube, there's a lot of dementia patients who are completely catatonic, and then if you play music, something from their youth, they come to life, they start remembering things, and once the music is shut off, you know, that's it, they're back to the way they were. So it
Mm.
does trigger different parts of the brain, and we know so little about the brain. The brain is has so much to teach us, and we're still learning about it in 2020. So I loved actually researching neurologists and talking to them and learning what they were about in that regard. And then, of course, you know, going to India, like I said, just as an actor, everything that my character experienced, I was experiencing as well because it was
Mm.
her first time there as well. So it was a bit of a method, a bit of a method move there.
Yeah, and you brought up earlier that you've been directing, and also I was reading that you've produced some projects. So I suppose how different is the creative fulfillment from doing those kind of things compared to acting in them?
Sure. Wearing many hats, it seems daunting to a lot of people. It's just my
Mm.
natural ability. I don't know the right word for it. It's my natural drive to sort of wear a lot of hats and be a problem solver. But I think the question, what you're trying to ask is like, which do I prefer more? Which a lot of people ask me. And there's no preference. I'm a very creative person. I consider myself to be a storyteller no matter what the medium is. But at the end of the day, if you're asking like what's the preference of what's easier, definitely for me, being a performer, like going on stage, singing my song and leaving, or being an actor in someone else's project, going in, doing my part, saying goodnight and going home is a much easier endeavor because as a producer and a director, you're always the first one there and the last one to leave, and you're staying with a project for a year until it's
Right.
completed. So, uh, you know, being an actor is such a joy because you get to do your part, you put your little, you know, your little piece into the puzzle, and then go home and move on to the next thing, and that is so lovely. um, but not to detract away from the other two, you know, the other things. I love them all sort of equally, but acting is the easiest in a lot of ways.
Right. And I suppose if anyone who's reading or watching this wanted to find out more information about you or your projects, where
Mhm.
could they look for that?
Definitely, my website is a great resource, which is www.tameladamico.com. It's
Mm.
Tameladamico. And all of my social media is at Tamela D'Amico, Tameladamico. And I try to keep my website up to date. If not, any of my socials is always basically telling you what I'm up to.
Yeah, and this is actually now the last question I've got here, and I'll keep it simple, but what are you most looking forward to in 2021?
I'm most looking forward to getting back to work in a very real way
Mm.
and seeing and engaging friends and family, and it sounds so silly, but just hugging people,
Yeah.
just really getting back to humanity.